If the standoff between Israelis and Palestinians sometimes seems to you like it's frozen in time, well, it's all kicking off this week at the opening of the UN General Assembly. Palestinians vow to press the case for statehood. Israelis warn of retaliation. And the Obama administration's caught between voters at home who will accept nothing short of a veto and Arab public opinion that says it will not stand for that. And if this small corner of the Fertile Crescent may have fallen out of the headlines since the start of the Arab Spring, we're going to see why it's now back with a vengeance, and with our guests spell out perhaps the scenarios going forward. Today in the France 24 debate showdown at the United Nations, and we'll be joined in just a few minutes by France 24 International Affairs editor Annette Young. She's at UN headquarters. With us here in the studio, number 2 at the Israeli Embassy in Paris, Sami Ravel, welcome to the show. Let's welcome as well Paris-based attorney John Whitbeck, who's advised Palestinian negotiating teams since the time of the Oslo Accords.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and with us as well, Mahmoud Zawra. He runs the Popular Resistance Committee in the Ramallah suburb of Bilin. What are the Popular Resistance Committees?
The Popular Resistance Committee is a non-violent grassroots movement, independent grassroots movement, all over the villages, which where the wall, the illegal wall, and the illegal settlements are built on the land of
between Israel and the West Bank.
No, but inside the Palestinian land, because the 90% of the wall is not built between Israel and Palestine. 90% of the wall is built deeply inside the Palestinian land. So this is like more than 110 villages from south of Hebron up to the north of Jenin. These villages are affected, so those people adopt the strategy of non-violent resistance in order to resist all these violations against the farmers, against the human beings in Palestine.
We'll get back to that in a moment. Let me first
just react on that point, because if you talk about the security barrier, of course, it has to be made clear that unfortunately, Israelis have been under terrorist attacks for many, many years now. Actually, since the Oslo Accords, these terrorist attacks have been magnified. Just lately, we had an attack on a bus stop near the International Convention Center in Jerusalem. A group of youths was attacked. A few of them were killed in Tel Aviv. They were just going to have fun in the evening, and they were killed by a terrorist. And 13 cells of Hamas were exposed, which were preparing further terrorist attacks. So, of course, security measures, such as a security barrier, are needed in order to safeguard Israeli lives.
I want to apply for this.
Okay, gentlemen, please.
Because it's important. If the Israelis are interested in building barriers between people instead of building bridges between people, they are allowed to build it on the borders, but we are not going to help them, because we never believed in building barriers between people, especially after demolishing Berlin Wall in the 9th of November of 1989.
We'll get back to
that.
I wouldn't want to comment on the peace process, but of course...
We'll get back.
We do want to build bridges.
You asked for this.
No, we do want to bridge bridges through the peace process, but obviously on a day-to-day basis, lives are sacred, and we have to defend the well-being of our citizens.
Let's hope we can build bridges during this debate. Stephen Ekovich is with us as well. Thank you for being with us.
Sure.
He teaches foreign policy at the American University of Paris. By the way, the France 24 debate, where you can weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrancoisF24. Now, this week's date was marked in red on the calendar for months, despite some late shuttle diplomacy out of Washington. The Palestinian president on Friday sticking by the script when he spoke before heading to New York.
We will come back to negotiate on all the other issues, but we want to come back, God willing, to get a full membership in the Security Council.
Interesting piece, and I'll begin with you, Stephen Ekovich. You're watching this from the outside a bit. You're the man in the middle, as it were, here. In the Financial Times, saying Mahmoud Abbas, who's been criticized as weak, oftentimes, at least in one way, will have proved a success what he does. After years of diplomatic neglect, the issue of Palestinian statehood is once again at the top of the international agenda. And so in that respect, it is a success. But Is it a dangerous week that's beginning?
It could be. He's also, of course, playing for his own public opinion. It's interesting that in that speech he said the PLO was the sole representative, furthermore, of the Palestinian people. That excludes the government in the Gaza Strip, for example. It could be perilous. The American president says it is. A former American president yesterday, Bill Clinton, said it was perilous and dangerous. But it looks like President Abbas is adamant on this. We can't know today, I can't know today, to what extent this is really an opening move in a diplomatic chess game, being so adamant. I thought his speech was a little ambiguous and ambivalent. He did seem to leave certain doors open. He left himself some wiggle room. So we're going to see what happens when this goes to the Security Council. It's going to take a long time. There's not going to be a decision right away at the Security Council. And in that time, perhaps this is a gambit to really get negotiations going. However, we've learned also in the Israeli press today, in the world press, that Prime Minister Netanyahu has offered compromises, several compromises, that were refused by President Abbas. So it looks like he's determined to go straight to the Security Council, but we'll see at what point he's willing to use that, playing that strong card to try to get what really counts in the situation, and that is real negotiations between the parties concerned, that is Israel and the Palestinians, and for the American president, and even from people in the region and in Europe. The only way that you're going to have peace between the Palestinians and Israelis is for the two parties concerned to negotiate that directly. That's clear.
John Whitbeck, you've been privy to many a false start when it comes to these negotiations. Why are things coming to a head at this particular point?
I think it's important to recall that it's now almost 23 years since the state of Palestine was formally declared, and almost 20 years since the Madrid conference that launched the so-called peace process.
1991.
Right, October. And during that period, the number of Israeli settlers in the occupied Palestinian territories has tripled. And with each passing year, the chances of actually achieving a decent two-state solution have diminished, almost to the vanishing point. The Palestinians, therefore, find themselves at a crossroads. They must decide whether to continue pursuing a two-state solution, notwithstanding all the evidence that a decent two-state solution is no longer possible, or change their goal to the pursuit of a single democratic state in all of the former mandate of Palestine, free of discrimination based on race and religion, and without and with equal rights for everyone. And this UN initiative has to be seen in that context. It is a last chance effort to breathe life back into a dying two-state solution by using international law and international support to level the playing field and make meaningful negotiations with Israel finally possible.
Let's pick up on that first point you made. We're hearing a lot of word, Sami Ravel, that there is serious talk about a new freeze on building settlements going on. Have you heard anything about this?
Well, first of all, it has to be reminded that this government was the first Israeli government that took a very courageous decision to freeze settlement construction for 10 months. And during these 10 months, the Palestinian Authority, headed by Mahmoud Abbas, did not come back to the negotiation table. Actually, after these 10 months, the American administration tried to extend it and to offer some kind of another compromise. Israel was willing to make another compromise in order to enable talks to begin, because our vision is a vision of two states. A Palestinian state, which will recognize Israel's rights to exist as a Jewish state,
but to answer
and which will live side by side in peace and security with Israel.
Right.
We do want to
negotiate. Are there negotiations for a new freeze that are underway right now in New York and back-channel negotiations?
There are no specific talks about this issue, but there are extensive talks with Tony Blair, the representative of the quartet, with the American administration, with the European Union, with key ministers of the European Union, because Israel's keen interest is to find a compromise which will enable Israelis and Palestinians to go back to the negotiation table, because this initiative in the UN will just create tensions is a great violation of agreements and will not solve anything. It will just perpetuate the conflict. We do want to go back to negotiations in order to solve the conflict and to find a solution to all permanent settlement issues.
We have to look carefully at what is meant by freeze in this, because there's some debate about this. The previous president, George Bush, was in agreement that there could be so-called natural growth within already existing settlements. The current president, when he called for a freeze, also called for a freeze with the so-called natural growth. Only later did his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, admit that, indeed, natural growth inside already existing settlements would be okay for the Americans. But any new settlements were destabilizing and didn't help the process.
Just to add one point, I mean, we are focusing on one issue, the settlements, which will be on the table to negotiate. Right. But there are many other issues. There is the security issues. There is the question of refugees. The Palestinians want to ensure the right of refugees to return. This will mean the end of the state of Israel as it is. Of course, we have to have a solution on this issue as well. And all other permanent status issues have to be solved and discussed at the same time.
Let me first go through, just 1 minute, Mahmoud. First want to bring in Annette Young, who is in New York for France 24. Annette, thanks for joining us. Any word on, because I have the agenda here in front of me, what is it? Barack Obama speaks to the UN on Wednesday, on Friday, Mahmoud Abbas, and then the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So the clock is ticking. What are you hearing in terms of negotiations going on in back rooms in New York City?
Well, I was at a press briefing early this morning in New York with the French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé, who indicated that he'll be meeting with President Abbas later this afternoon, as will the French President. Also, President Sarkozy will be meeting with the Palestinian leader tomorrow, which is part of all the sort of ongoing last-minute frantic negotiations which are underway here in New York. I mean, lights were burning brightly well into the wee hours of this morning and will continue to do so. In fact, Alain Juppé told us that in the next 2 to 3 or 4 days, I mean, literally right up to the wire, they're going to try and see whether there can be an alternative to the Palestinians going ahead with presenting their bid for statehood on Friday. Having said that, the official line from the Palestinians is that is what they will be doing. In fact, earlier today, President Abbas indicated as such to the UN Secretary General. But it's clear, given what's at stake, that there's a lot of activity at the moment. And what are the various options that they can do? I mean, the interesting thing that Alain Juppé said during his briefing is that he talked openly about the quandary that European leaders and European governments like his find themselves in. How can they say that they want, they acknowledge the right for the Palestinians to have a state, but when it comes to the crunch, say, hang on, no, not now. So it's a very murky scenario at the moment, obviously, as he said himself, it's changing not by the day, but by the hour, in trying to find a sort of alternative position. Will that mean amending it to just going to the General Assembly instead for enhanced observer status? Or what other resolutions will they be coming up with? Everything's up for grabs in the next few days, that's for sure.
All right, so it's not everyone playing their cards close to their chest from what Annette Young is saying there. Mohamed Zouari, what will it take for Palestinians to ease off on their position?
Let me just explain one thing. I think it's our right. It's enough for us to live under occupation, which is recognized by all the United Nations, by all the states all over the world. It's enough to have this longest occupation, which is a replacement occupation. The second thing, what we are asking for is not for the moon. We are asking for the implementation of the international law. The third thing, if I want to see the Israeli policy since 1991, when we went to the process of peace and negotiations, what we have, as my colleague said, that we start with 100,000 settlers illegally living in Palestine, and we end with 500,000 settlers living in Palestine. And the idea of a Palestinian state is dying, is melting in the between the settlers and between the attacks of the settlers. So I think now it's the time to go to bring all the file to the United Nations back. Let's go back to the United Nations, because to be honest, as a grassroots person, as a person who is living on the street, I didn't trust Tony Blair. I didn't trust Obama for their policy in this conflict. And I think now it's a different environment for me as a Pacific.
Right, but what will it take to ease the tension in New York this week?
To ease the tension in New York?
Is there for you is there a key point in which Israelis and Palestinians can reach some sort of deal this week?
I didn't think so. I didn't think so that the Palestinians and the Israelis are going to have an agreement within this week. But the best thing is to go to the United Nations and to submit our admission to have our state. And this is important for the Palestinians in order to see that whether we are really, as a states, calling for the two-state solution. This is important because I never heard any state all over the world calling for alternative solution rather than two-state solution. Even Israel is calling for two-state solution. But what two states? It is the implementation of the international law. There will be no Palestinian will accept less than the implementation of the international law. This must be clear because we ask to implement the international law. And we want to go back to the resolutions of the international law of 1948, when the United Nations stopped the recognition of Israel in 1948 for some conditions. And I want the Israelis to read this and to understand that the Palestinians suffered when they accept now to have the Palestinian state on 22% of historical Palestine and to have East Jerusalem as a capital. And now, one more message. It is important. Now we are living in a different environment. And this environment is the spring of Arabs.
All right, let's talk about, we're going to talk about that in part two.
I just want to say something which is very clear. It's also stated in all the agreements we have signed with the Palestinians that any agreement should be negotiated. It's, I think, obvious to anybody that you cannot impose peace. You have to negotiate it. And of course, issues are very serious. We have to negotiate directly with the Palestinians. This initiative raises very serious doubts because what Mahmoud Abbas says, actually, he said it in a New York Times interview last May. He said, I want to have this declaration by the United Nations in order to go to international... I didn't interrupt you. Let me just...
Why you didn't
negotiate
with Lebanon in
He says, I want to go to the United Nations to have this declaration in order to go to UN institutions to delegitimize Israel's rights to defend itself and to exist. Now, furthermore, just before going to the UN, he signs a pact with the Hamas, which states clearly that it wants to erase Israel from the map. So this initiative to do a unilateral step, go to the United Nations, try to impose some kind of a solution, will just create tensions in the region and unfortunately will not solve anything. The only way to solve things is through negotiations which will resolve the serious issues on the table.
But I think in which
both sides will have to compromise in order to find the deal which will end the conflict.
We're going to try to look forward when we come back. Stay with us. The France 24 debate continues.